So I finished everything from the Richardson-White debate other than the question and answer period. Up front, I just want to say I'm sick and tired of Lazarus being used for a theological point or accounts of miracles being used to make a theological point. Lazarus was dead. Jesus commanded that he be raised, and you take that and build your soteriology around it. That's just not the purpose of the narrative. AK said something about God restraining his own decree, and I don't know if that's the best language to use, and I don't know if that was like just part of the live debate aspect of it. I would have pushed back. God doesn't have to restrain people from evil they could do the way James White said it if he didn't decree them to do more evil than what they already did. That's what I would focus on. I distinguish between the decree and maybe even the patience and some of the things that are going on. And I'm not even sure if the patience argument was a good argument. Like, I can think of a scenario where I could say, hey, take someone obnoxious and send them over to Alive and cause trouble. And they're going to go there and be obnoxious and cause trouble. And I would never do that. But I know there are probably people who would. Now, I'm going to be patient listening to them, be obnoxious. But I sent them there for a purpose. Now, I'm not saying God does that. I'm not saying the analogy's full and well. But the idea of being patient with these people who are being obstinate and resistant and whatever words you want to use in order for some purpose to come about. I don't think patience is the emotion that necessarily undoes the idea of a decree. Now, I've argued from ideas like regretting making man and stuff like that from Genesis 6. I think that's stronger, but that's outside the context. I don't like that Dr. White plays these word games and deals with semantics like, the debate's not about Calvinism, or my view is not Calvinism, my view is exegesis, which leads me to Calvinism. Like, it's one thing, which is odd, because the opening of the debate, Jeremiah introduced AK as from Church of Christ theology. And the more you know about Church of Christ, the more you know there's not a specific theology that, we all adhere to. We all have similar doctrines and slight nuance about those doctrines. But if you're going to use the term Church of Christ theology and then argue, well, it's not about a Calvinist reading or a Calvinist eisegesis or this or that, I just don't like that. And then to say that, well, if you read the text and exegete it properly, then you're going to go to the Calvinist interpretation of it or theology, then, that's what you're arguing. That's what you're debating. And they're both in the positive, so let's just leave that aside. Dr. White mentions total depravity multiple times, and I'm just like, it's hard to debate a Calvinist on any subject if it involves a point of Calvinism. And this point is basically irresistible grace or unconditional election. Like, those two are kind of intertwined in this reading of Romans 9, whether that is involved in the text or not. But it's hard to push back on any of those things because you can always retreat to a different point of Calvinism, and that has to be established in some other passage. I thought it was interesting in the question and answer, Dr. White came up with a trichotomy. You either believe in open theism, or you believe in a free will position that can make God a liar, or you are a Reformed or Calvinist individual. There's so many different nuances between those views and views of free will, and Molinism wasn't even mentioned. And I know he's aware of Molinism. He's debated it before. He said recently he's not going to do any more debates on Molinism. And Molinism is not AK's view, and it's not a view that demands that God be made a liar. And let's talk a little bit about, he seems to cast doubt on this idea that God needs to set in order billions of free will choices in order for the cross to happen. Like, the fact that you can't fathom how God could plan that shows his greatness and his omniscience. Like, any objection you could have to that, God would have to make sure billions of free will choices happen in just such a way. If your objection is he has to, put people in different places and different times to make sure that X, Y, and Z doesn't happen or his plan isn't thwarted, that's one thing. But to make it seem like God, it's impossible that God could plan billions of free will choices and still see things that he wants to be accomplished, that's not a slight against the position. And many people say if God has to plan exactly everything that will be done, and in order for it to be done, then that's a weaker and a smaller God. And that objection might not hold up. But the objection, you're talking about billions and billions of people making free will choices, and billions of free will choices, and trillions of free will choices. Yeah, that's what's amazing about it. The idea that God allows for all individuals to have libertarian free will choices, and things are still accomplished according to his will. I like AK pushing back on him. There's a distinction between certain choices being restricted, like they wanted to stone Jesus, but he escaped from them because he had to go to the cross. But just because there are some restrictions on our libertarian free will doesn't mean that we don't have libertarian free will. And I think that's foundational in the philosophical aspect of the discussion. It's funny to me that the claim is that libertarian free will is not in the text. That's the Calvinist claim or the Reformed Baptist claim. But then they'll say, well, this text disproves libertarian free will. So, and they're not making the positive argument that this disproves libertarian free will. They're just saying it's not in the text, and it's not elsewhere in Scripture. And the terms libertarian free will or free will, we can talk about the word will, we can talk about the word choice, and other things. But I think that's kind of a sidestep to say, well, you're not going to get libertarian free will from the text. But if that's true, then you can't use the text to prove libertarian free will is false. Like, if that's what's being said, and you want to affirm that's what Jacob and Esau is about, then that's one thing. But you can read the text without making that conclusion, or that conclusion even being part of it. Like, I think that's the main thing. You can read Romans 9, not get a hint of Calvinist doctrine, it be taught elsewhere, and we can agree on the exegesis of the passage. That's kind of the bottom line. I think a lot of times people abuse their closing statement. They want to wrap everything up and make it sound like they've done their job or done this or that. Like, I think Dr. White hinted at things like Romans 3 and Romans 5 throughout his debate, and every debater has to make the choice. Am I going to address that, or am I going to stick to the context? And it's a struggle. But then your closing debate is going to be Romans 3 and what it means, and Romans 5 and what it means, and therefore, and build your case of tulip and try to frame Romans 9 in that way. So, even if Calvinism is true, and you're building it from other text and saying that's what Romans 9 is saying, that's not necessarily the case. Because people who aren't Calvinists can read it and get the same conclusion that AK has. And I'd like to hear an argument against libertarian free will outside of Romans 9, because I'm just curious myself. I'm not sure if it's done or people do this or that. People say, well, Jonah didn't have a choice. He had restrictions, and that was part of the debate. You can go and watch it. But if you didn't have Romans 9, could you make a case against libertarian free will? And that's not a review, that's more of a challenge, but I might just make a separate video just about that. So if you can keep up with the philosophical stuff and the scriptural stuff, it's worth your time to investigate and sit through the debate.